From 2001 to 2006, he took 49 lives, imitating his idol, the most famous maniac of the USSR Andrei Chikatilo. Pichushkin's victims were those who were weaker than him, the disabled, teenagers, women and the homeless. The maniac attacked in Bittsevsky Park in the south of Moscow, from which he got his nickname. He dreamed of bringing the count of his reprisals to 64. By the number of cells on the chessboard. Alexander Yuryevich Pichushkin was born on the 9th of April, 1974 in Mytishchi, a serial maniac. The childhood of the future executioner, according to him, was difficult, like most maniacs. His father left the family when Alexander was only 9 months old. After that, the boy grew up with his mother, and his grandfather took an active part in his upbringing. In 1976, he and his mother moved to live from the Mytishchi district in the Moscow neighborhood of Zayuzino, on Kherson Street, House 2, Apartment 40. Alexander was not a hooligan, seemed modest and unsociable, loved to play chess. He began to have oddities in his behavior. Once he shocked everyone by painting Lenin in the nude. Soon, according to Pichushkin's mother, an accident happens to him. He falls off the swing and gets a traumatic brain injury, after which he ends up in the hospital. As a result of the injury, Pichushkin had complications with speech. He confused SH and S, and also made mistakes in the spelling of these letters, which is why his mother transferred him to the 138th Speech Therapy Boarding School. After boarding school, Pichushkin goes to study at vocational school as a carpenter. For the first time, Alexander committed the crime in 1992, at the age of 18, strangled a classmate Mikhail Adichuk and threw him into a well.
Hey, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You have to subscribe to the channel and like it so you don't miss new videos.
The body was never found. The first massacre, like the first love, after 14 years, he confesses during interrogation. Pichushkin pondered the first massacre for a long time. After some time, he realized that he wanted to take another life. He finally realized this after the trial of Andrei Chikatilo. He later admitted that he envied him and wanted to surpass him in the number of victims. Pichushkin carefully prepared for attacks, trained, pumped his muscles. Like Chikatilo, he wore plaid shirts and collected all the newspaper articles about him. There is a version that Alexander's mother knew about this, but did not attach much importance. During the commission of a series of fatal attacks in the 2001 and the 2006 years, he lived with his mother, Natalia Elmuradovna, in Moscow on Kersonskaya Street, not far from Bittsevsky Park. He worked as a loader in a supermarket until 2000. After the arrest, Pichushkin stated that he wanted to take the lives of at least 64 people so that the number of victims was equal to the number of cells on the chessboard. After each life he took, he pasted a number and closed the cell with some object, a cork, a checker, and so on. However, during one of the interrogations, he said that after filling all the cells, he would buy a new board. Only 3 managed to stay alive after the assassination attempt. At first, Pichushkin tried to attack alcoholics, homeless people and other antisocial personalities who, in his opinion, had no right to life. Soon he switched to his acquaintances, claiming that taking the life of someone you know is especially pleasant. In the 2005-2006 years, rumors spread in the southwest of Moscow that a maniac was operating in the Bittsevsky forest, attacking elderly people with special cruelty. Since the beginning of the 26th year, publications began to appear in the press. The executioner was baptized by the Bittsevsky Maniac. On the 19th of February, 2000 of the 6th year, a man was detained in Bittsevsky Park, who tried to escape while trying to check documents. The operatives opened fire and wounded him in the thigh. Later it turned out that the detainee had nothing to do with the attacks in Bittsevsky Park. The press discussed 2 possible motives for his unusual behavior. According to one version, the operatives who stopped the man were out of shape, and the man decided that they were trying to rob him. According to the second version, the man was carrying a knife for self-defense. At that time, there were many rumors about the Bittsevsky Maniac in Moscow, and when the operatives drew attention to him, he was afraid that he might be prosecuted for carrying a cold weapon. On the 13th of March, another man disguised as a woman was detained in Bittsevsky Park, who, at the sight of police officers, also tried to flee. A hammer was found in his bag. During the investigation, it turned out that the detainee had an alibi at the time of the crimes. On the 14th of June, an attack was committed on Marina Moskaliva, during the investigation of which the investigation came to her colleague Alexander Pichushkin. Marina, going on a date with the criminal, left her son his mobile phone number. Alexander himself knew about this fact, but still decided to commit a crime. On June 16, Pichushkin himself was detained. After a while, the arrested man declared that he was the Bittsevsky Maniac. But the search activities continued, as the investigation did not exclude the possibility of self-incrimination. A few days later, Pichushkin testified on other crimes committed on the territory of Bittsevsky Park. In April of the 27th year, the maniac was found to be of limited sanity, which implies the possibility of punishing the convicted person to places of deprivation of liberty with mandatory compulsory treatment at the place of stay, according to the results of the examination conducted in December of the 2006 year at the Serbsky Institute. In June of the 27th year, the prosecutor's office of the city of Moscow completed the investigation of the criminal case. Pichushkin was charged with committing 52 intentional crimes, mainly on the territory of Bittsevsky Park. On August 13, 2007, preliminary hearings in the case of Alexander began in the Moscow City Court. The public prosecutor at the trial was Moscow prosecutor Yuri Semin. According to his forecasts, the trial of the criminal was to last at least 2 months. 41 victims and 98 prosecution witnesses were involved in the case. The court granted the motion of the accused to consider his case by a jury and announced that the trial would be open. The selection of the jury was scheduled for the 13th of September. According to the investigation, Pichushkin committed crimes from 1992 to 2006. The accused was most active in the 2005-2006 years on the territory of the Bittsevsky Forest Park in the south of Moscow. Mostly the victims of the defendant were men. Among the victims there were only 3 women. 2 were deprived of life: Larissa Kolodjina, Marina Moskaliva. There was an attempt on one of them, to Marina Vericheva. The defendant's appointed lawyer said that his client pleads guilty in full. The exact number of victims of the Bittsevsky Maniac is still unknown. Earlier, in an interview with one of the TV channels, Pichushkin said that he actually committed 61 fatal attacks and broke the record of Chikatilo. At the same time, I do not know that Maria Vericheva escaped after the attack. I knew that the verdict would be absolutely, and he also knew when they were stabbing about 12 bodies. They didn't even want to hear that I had 60. At the same time, according to him, many of his victims were his acquaintances. According to Pichushkin, he took the victims under various pretexts to the forest park, where he deprived them of their lives with hammer blows to the head and hid the bodies. During the investigation, Pichushkin showed several burial sites of bodies. Representatives of the Ministry of Internal Affairs expressed the opinion that Pichushkin surpassed even the famous serial maniac Andrei Chikatilo, who was executed in 1994 for 53 lives taken. He also stated that if he had not been detained, he would not have bothered to attack. If they hadn't caught me, I would never have stopped. Never. Saved the lives of many by catching me. When Pichushkin was being filmed by the crew of the NTV channel, he said here, "And Shniki, I will return to Bittsevsky Park. My hand remembers the hammer well." On the 24th of October, the jury of the Moscow City Court unanimously issued an indictment. Pichushkin was found completely guilty of 48 lives taken and 3 attempts. On October 25, he gave his last word in court, saying that he did not regret his actions. "All this time I've been doing what I wanted. I have been under arrest for 500 days now, and all this time everyone is deciding my fate. Cops, judges, prosecutors. But I decided the fate of 60 people at the time. I was the only judge, prosecutor, and executioner. I alone performed all your functions." On October 29, 2007, Pichushkin was sentenced to life imprisonment in a special regime colony. He was found guilty of the massacre of 48 people and 3 attempts, while he himself confessed to committing 12 more serious crimes, including the massacre of Mikhail Adichuk, committed in the 92nd year. On November 2, 2000, Alexander Pichushkin appealed the verdict. In the appeal, he asked to reduce the sentence from a life sentence to 25 years. In February of the 2008 year, the Supreme Court of the Russian Federation rejected the complaint. On the 16th of December, 2000 of the 10th year to the 3rd of April, 2000 of the 11th year, a wave of violent attacks took place in Irkutsk, committed by 19-year-old Artem Anyafriv and 18-year-old Nikita Litkin, who lived in Akademgorodok. The whole motive of maniacs was based on sadism. There was no specifics in the choice of victims. Among the victims were a 12-year-old boy and an unknown homeless woman. The guys used hammers and knives as weapons. During the investigation, the criminals reported that in the 27th year they watched a program about Alexander Pichushkin on TV, became interested in him. Anyafriv even created a Pichushkin group on the network, Our President, and it was after that that they had a desire, following the example of Alexander, to deprive the lives of those who, in their opinion, had no right to exist. Alexander Pichushkin was transferred to the Polar Owl Special Regime Colony to serve his sentence. At first, in the colony, he was kept in the same cell with a Chechen criminal, whom he began to threaten with violence, telling him one day, "I don't like you." After that, fearing for his life, he urgently asked for a transfer to another cell. Eventually, due to systematic conflicts with his cellmates, Pichushkin was placed in solitary confinement. While serving a life sentence, Alexander has repeatedly stated that in case of parole, he will continue to take lives from people. "If I were released now, the first thing I would do would be to kill a couple of people to relieve stress. He would abuse a woman and drink vodka, and then as the card will fall." A huge number of documentaries have been made about Alexander Pichushkin. I'll tell you some of them. A Sincere Confession, Confessions of a Bittsevsky Maniac, The Maximum Program, Bittsevsky Maniac, First Blood,